Tonight, we're going to talk to author Paula McLain about her new book, When the Stars Go Dark. Paula has written top-selling titles such as The Paris Wife, Circling the Sun, and Love and Ruin. Her body of work also includes a memoir and 2 collections of poetry. She is the recipient of several fellowships, including Yaddo, the McDowell Company, the Cleveland Arts Prize, and the National Endowment for the Arts. Paula will be joined by author Laura McKowen. Laura published a memoir titled We Are the Luckiest. She has been featured in the New York Times, The Guardian, The Atlantic, WebMD, Psychology Today, The Today Show, and more. In 2020, she founded the Luckiest Club, a global sobriety support group. She also hosts the Tell Me Something True podcast. Before we get started tonight, I want to tell you about a few upcoming programs. On October 29th, we are holding a panel discussion with the editors and contributing authors of the recently published anthology, Black in the Middle. Black in the Middle focuses on how deindustrialization and the economic downturn in the Midwest has impacted and continues to affect the Black population. This is a part of the Between the Lines series. And on August 5th, we are also hosting Jess Walter, the author of The Cold Millions. This is a collaboration with the Lake County League of Libraries. Walter will discuss The Cold Millions and his writing career with Willoughby Library's Travis Courtney. If you have a question for Paula or Laura during the program and you're watching on Zoom, type it into the chat. If you're watching on Facebook Live, type your question as a comment there. We will hold Q&A after the presentation. And with that, I will turn it over to Paula and Laura.
Thank you. Hi, Laura. Thanks so much for offering to do this with me tonight. And I just want to, for those who are joining us tonight who aren't familiar with your work, this memoir, We Are the Luckiest, is such a beautiful book. And I just want to thank you because I'm really struck by the way that you, as an author, as a speaker, as just a force in the world, are kind of encouraging us, or maybe even more, like you're determined, right, to encourage us and to do yourself some really deep looking into sort of who we are as humans, what our experience is, even if that makes us uncomfortable. And it's just kind of my jam too. I believe that discomfort won't kill us, but sometimes silence and repression will. And I just love your commitment to truth telling, and your podcast, Tell Me Something True, is my new favorite thing. So for those of you, yay! I listen to podcasts, as I always call it, my continuing education. And I take long dog walks and I listen, and it's just my favorite thing. And you have a great interview with Cheryl Strait, who of course is just so wise and important. And I was just saying right before we went on air, an interview with Peter Rollins, who, what is he, a kind of a spiritual sort of, what is he? What is his comedian slash?
He's a theologian, I would say, philosopher, and
a theological, philosophical comedian, kind of, right?
He's not an intentional comedian, but he is very funny.
I know, but he's so funny. And anyway, for those of you who are not familiar with Laura's podcast, check it out immediately. And anyway, just thanks for being here, and thanks to the library.
This is your event.
Yeah. I know.
You're so sweet. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. And it is your event, and you're so kind to talk about my work. But I was just saying before we got on that it's a total treat and a little bit of a out-of-body experience in a way to be talking to you, because I was not always an author, and I had a very different life before I got sober. And so this is just a treat for me, and I am so grateful to be here. So I'm just going to kind of jump right in and
let's do it.
And this is a broad question, and then I'm going to zoom right in. So,
okay.
I don't know if you believe that stories find us, if that's your experience as a writer. I haven't heard you talk about that before, or if you plan them, or a little bit of both. So I'm curious about this book at this point in your career. Why do you think this book happened now for you, to you?
Yeah. So great question. And honestly, I have no idea why this idea came to me right now. Sometimes I think that ideas have their own agenda. I'm a big believer in the subconscious, right? And like the stuff that's cooking kind of back there that we need to, or I don't know, we need to wrestle with, or are wrestling with even in our sleep, in our dreams, and all of that stuff comes to visit occasionally. And I was, for 10 years writing these historical novels about women who actually live, like enlivening, intimating their experience and making it super granular and bringing it down to earth, really, and having an amazing time. Like I just really thought I was going to keep doing that forever. And then one day I was deep in the middle of Love and Ruin, like really deep, and when I invest in these characters, it's like down the rabbit hole. I just eat, sleep, breathe them. I get super obsessed. So I was writing about Martha Gellhorn, and I was in Madrid. Like I was in Madrid, in my mind, in my imagination, in my dreams. I was in Madrid in 1937. And, the city was surrounded on three sides by Franco's army. And I'm in her consciousness. And yet when I went for a dog walk one afternoon, I was visited by this character. And it just happens sometimes. That's where ideas get super interesting. And the creative process is so interesting because we don't understand it. We don't know what ideas are, and this way that they seem to come from both outside of us and inside of us. And Liz Gilbert has written about it beautifully, and others, Stephen Pressfield in The War of Art, and etc. But this character, this missing persons detective, and I could see how she was connected to this girl who vanishes one day, and how her past, essentially, because this is what I believe, right? That who she is in the world is what draws her to find this person, and that their destinies kind of intertwine.
Yeah, that's okay. So it found you, Anna.
Long answer for it found me and kind of blew me away. Yeah, because of course, what do I know about suspense? Like I don't even read them. You know what I mean?
Really?
Like it was this whole different set of conventions and a language I didn't speak. It was like I suddenly started to dream in Russian, So the risk level was high. The stakes were super high. And in fact, I was afraid to tell anyone that I'd had this idea, the way that we are afraid to tell people what we really want to do, because we're afraid they're going to tell us not to do it, or that we're being wildly reckless or something like that. But the idea didn't go away. And so one day I told my agent, and she, thank goodness, said, that sounds amazing. And I would just say this, like when somebody tells you what they want to do and what's important to them, really your only response should be, that sounds amazing, and go do that. If you want to keep growing as humans, right?
And if they don't do that, then you're telling the wrong people. Like that's another thing I think Liz Gilbert said, or somewhat about, these are like baby ideas that you have. Be very careful with them, because it's like handing over something precious.
Exactly.
So did you, because you were in the middle of writing Love and Ruin, so did you put a pin in it and wait?
I had to. I was under contract. I mean, and there are people who can write 2 books at once, but I'm not one of those people. It's a really immersive experience for me. And it was hard. It was hard to finish that book and then tour for it, promote it for another year after that, and then revisit the idea. There were, of course, is always the possibility that it goes away and goes roosts in someone else's yard. Right?
All right. So that's I mean, I'm fascinated by fiction. I haven't written fiction. One of my sort of secrets that I don't share with many people that I want to try, but I can't even imagine what it's like to create a whole world. So we'll see about that.
I
Okay,
would
so
love to see you write a novel. So I'm not going to forget.
Well, you're
that
going to be the first person I call.
Yeah, I'm not going to forget that you said that. So this is pertinent because if you think about it, writing a memoir, which I've done too, and it was the first book of prose that I wrote, you kind of know what happens, right? It's not like you have to build a world, and you don't have to build a cast of characters because they come pre-packaged, like they're already there.
I know.
And then for 10 years, and then I wrote a contemporary novel, which took me 5 years because I had to teach myself to write a novel. And then I did these 3 historicals back to back to back, and really kind of started to feel like I was learning finally what I was doing, like getting comfortable. And then, of course, that's when I throw myself over a cliff again. And as terrified as I was, and as really, I didn't want to get it wrong. I didn't want to screw it up. I didn't want to fail. I didn't want to fail my readership, right? I didn't want to fail the story. I didn't want to fail the characters and the notion of the story. And there's a purity to an idea, in its crystallized form. It's like this little diamond, and then you have to really dig in and mess it up, right? And it can take many, many drafts until you feel like you know what it is you're doing. But here I am for the first time in a dozen years, having an opportunity to write a purely fictional character. And it was a huge surprise that I began to write personally. Like when I gave my character a backstory, I gave her, over time, I gave her my backstory. I gave her my experience growing up in foster care, and I gave her a lot of my deepest, truest obsessions.
You could feel that, and I didn't know that because we haven't talked about it, but I have a few questions about that. So, and they're really just about moments of the book that I cherished, and I just want you to talk about them, whether they were where they came. Okay, so there's a Rilke poem on page 116, and I won't read it, but it was part of the story. It was in the pocket of one of the missing persons, and I thought I'd read a lot of Rilke, but I had never come across that poem. So I was wondering.
We're both fans of Rilke. I know this. Yeah.
Do I have him on my arm? What did you know that poem before?
Yeah, I did. So there's a line in the poem, if you're not familiar with Rilke, it's like, anywhere I'm folded, right? Anywhere I am folded, I'm a lie. And that's just something that I've carried around for a long time, about what that means in our lives when we're trying to please others, perform for others, but also when we're trying to conceal a truth or an experience for whatever reason. And so I have Cameron, my victims that Anna becomes the most enmeshed with, have this be, it was just in her locker, and I have that be kind of a coded way that Anna feels that she can get close to Cameron and know her. And they share more than that. So when Anna learns that Cameron grew up adopted, she also sort of thinks that she maybe gets something about her that another detective might not, because Anna grew up in foster care. And I sort of let all that unfold. You know what I mean? Like, that is Anna, the way Anna grew up, and the particular attenuation and sort of how she carries the world, and how she's susceptible to other people's stories, and particularly to victim stories, those who are hurting, those who are silenced, the disenfranchised, and how Anna is connected to Cameron is how I, as a writer, am connected to them both. So there's this really nice kind of Venn diagram thing happening. So yeah, it was a gift, really. It was a gift to Anna that I gave her the Rilke poem. you know, it just appeared in a scene. Yeah.
I'm curious both as a reader and a writer, because it was like, it was perfect. And obviously no accident that you chose that one. And the line is, I don't want to stay folded anywhere, because where I am folded, there I am a lie, which was like, oh, and then,
yeah.
And then as a writer, just thinking, you know, did you know that before? Because I have little pieces of poetry or prose or whatever that I hope one day I get to use for the right thing, you know?
That you sort of collect.
Yeah.
Do you know the memoirist Nick Flynn?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, so he's brilliant, and he got his start as a poet, and we run in some similar circles, and I know he's sort of in your area, but we were at an artist colony together years ago when he was working on his book, Another Bullshit Night in Sex City, which is just a brilliant book, and he's a terrific poet too. But recently I saw something he posted, or an interview that he gave, or some little tidbit about a writer's tip, which I just absolutely love, which is what I believe, which is that trust the things that float your way when you're writing a book, that they belong to the book. Like when your book gets really sticky, right? When your book gets really sticky, that's the way I think about it. And everything that floats your way, a little bit of overheard conversation, right? You know, anything, it could be anything, a quote, a smell, like something that happens in your actual life that floats your way, a fortune in a fortune cookie, whatever, a color, the way the sky looks, the weather, anything, and that detail belongs in the book and belongs to you.
Oh, I love that.
See it, right? You're meant to see it, and you're meant to know it, and yeah,
that's amazing. I love that. So a similar type of question. There was in chapter 32, there's a scene that I think it is my favorite scene of the whole book. And it's after Eden dies, and Anna's the closest thing Anna had to a mother. And there's this scene with Lenore, the bird,
where a pet raven,
where Anna ends up hitting her after Eden dies, and it's this really tragic. It's full of so many things in that scene. She hits her, so she surprises herself and hits the bird, and then the bird squawks her phrase "don't you" to her, and then leaves, like flies away, and she can't find her. Yeah. And so you wrote this one part, I'd done something terrible and on purpose, and I couldn't take it back just because I felt sorry. Sorry wouldn't find her. Sorry was maybe the loneliest feeling of all I understood, because it only brought you back to yourself.
Yeah. Per se, in one moment, a lot of mothers and not enough mothering, you know?
Another great line, yes.
And so she doesn't know what to do with some of these feelings. She doesn't know what to do with attachment. She doesn't know how to handle relationships. And she certainly doesn't know how to handle big feelings without maybe being, you know, destructive. Lord, I'm just getting a handle on all that now, and I'm 55. So, you know, here she is, a young girl, and she's lost the mother figure that she's closest to. And so she acts out, she lashes out, and this terrible thing happens. So what I just said about the book being sticky, when I was writing the first draft of Stars, a girlfriend of mine came to visit that I used to live nearby in Vermont, and she works volunteer at a sanctuary for wounded birds and raptors in particular. And she talked about a bird that came to stay at the sanctuary, and the bird's name was Lenore, and it had a wounded wing and dragged it around behind it, and had a phrase from its previous life, which was, and only said one thing over and over again, and that was, don't you. And I had no idea, Laura, how I was going to use any of that in the book, because it's such a strange detail. And I was saying this,
but somehow fit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it totally fit in. And this is what happens when you write a novel, and maybe this is something that's happened to you writing memoir as well. You don't always know what you're about to say,
Mm.
right? You have a thread and you're following the thread. And it's like being, I have a friend who says writing a novel is like being a blind, naked mole rat. You know, you're sort of like digging through the dark, and you're sort of digging along through the dark, and you're very in, if it's working, in flow in the scene, you don't know what you're going to say next. And suddenly I found myself using this anecdote, you know, of Lenore sort of saying these words and having it mean something for the first time about Anna and about who she is. She always felt judged by the bird. And of course, we externalize feelings, you know, that we believe about ourselves. We put them onto other people. So Anna believes that she, not just that she's done something wrong, but that she is terribly wrong.
Yeah.
You know?
I have a raven on my, ravens are very,
Oh yeah, I know. I have them.
oh yeah, look at you.
Everywhere too. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a mascot for my sobriety support, my company. Ravens are a big,
Yeah, they're
and
very
they're
knowing, right? There's this
yeah, they usually
piercing.
yeah, they usually carry dark messages. Like that's the lore, but they also they've been symbols of death. But for me, it's like death is not so bad. Rebirth, and I got this like when I got sober. So
yeah.
Anyway, I that scene, I cried when I read that, because for Anna, and knowing what it's like to, I mean, it was just, there's so much unprocessed pain and inability she didn't know why she hit the animal, and then the animal leaves. It's just like, oh my God. But it was beautiful. It was beautiful. I had to ask about that.
I made a conscious decision too, to give Anna a backstory. There's almost like in this genre of suspense, there isn't a lot of backstory. And yet, I believe that if we're going to identify with the character, we have to know what they're carrying, not just what they're doing, but how the past impacts the present, which builds a future. And all of that to me is absolutely relevant. And I was the kind of reader as a kid who like put on the invisibility cloak of the book and just really wanted to climb inside. And that's the kind of book I want to write. It's the kind of book I still want to read.
Same.
Yeah, same, right? The good stuff.
I don't read a lot of suspense, or there's many ways, I guess, to put, we'll just call it suspense, but because of that, it's more about and there's a place for it when I feel like just a movement book, like I just want to move through a story, and not go too deep. That they're great. This was very different. It felt very different to me. So you did it.
Oh, thank you. I'll say one last thing about that line at the end, which is was perhaps the loneliest feeling of all, because it only brought you back to yourself. Lines like that, I've sometimes think that whatever wisdom is in my book is always slightly ahead of where I am as a person. It's almost like the stones on the path ahead of me, like my characters arrive at these truths, these understandings about the human condition, which are, they belong to me, they come through me. But if you had asked me in conversation, I might not have ever said that, but in the scene, in that particular shimmering event that's happening, as imagination is sort of being channeled through all of me, my personality, the way I see the world, my perception, it comes out. And the character and what they know and what they bring and all of that comes out sometimes in this wisdom. And it's beautiful. It makes me cry too. Not because like, wow, that's a kick-ass line, but because it's felt experience, You
experienced it. Yeah. My dear friend Jim calls it there's a future self reaching back to you all the time. And I think that's that happens for me in writing. For sure. My writing precedes my knowing a lot.
Yeah. I love
I
it.
know.
I mean, I love it, right? I mean, that's something that's amazing about the creative process and what we're doing. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's why when people say, writing healed me, writing saved me, it's not just this sort of it can sound very trite and hyperbolic, but
Right.
that's my experience. I wrote my way through sobriety because I think that I was a lot of that. I was going through the past, but also this future self reaching forward, like pulling me forward, right?
Well,
So
writing is my resilience. Like writing is how
that's
I,
a great way to put it.
right, survived my childhood and got me through. I mean, all of the chaos of my young adulthood and all of it. It's sort of like the way I, yeah, the way I
Yeah.
kicked like hell, like to get out
Yeah.
of where I
Yeah.
was. So
Yeah.
yeah, writing saved me too, and books and reading and right. It's
Yeah.
like, yeah.
Yes. 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 So you touched on a lot of topics that are close to my heart. I think that's why you thought that we would get along, or our mutual friend thought that we would.
Yeah.
And you're right. You talk, this book is a lot about trauma and pain, difficulty, overcoming those things, resilience,
Yeah.
even a little bit of metaphysical. There's definitely a spiritual element in here, which I'm not calling spirituality metaphysical, but both exist in this one of the characters that you have. And then there's this thread of alcohol in Anna's life that I'm interested in because of and I noticed it and how you sort of handled it and put it in there. And it's not a main part of the story, but it's there. So I was wondering what you were exploring with that, or where that came from for you.
So the research process for this book was really interesting. It's so different than what I was doing when I was writing
Yeah.
historicals, where I would just do this super, super steeping in biography. And, I had to read all of Hemingway, for instance. Then I would have to learn about bullfighting and absinthe and all those crazy modernists. And I would just sort of do these, right, dives into all these little buckets as a way to teach myself what I needed to know about the book. And the voice, in a way, was this amalgamation of my voice and Hadley's voice, my voice and Beryl Markham's voice, my voice and Martha Gellhorn's voice. Here, Anna was this, as I said, a fictional character, but I started to really, panic is not the exact word, but it felt really important to me that her voice have absolute veracity. She's a missing persons expert. Like, she has to know what she knows in a visceral way that she wears in her skin, like in her spleen. Right. So I did I read a lot of true crime, which was disturbing and informed the book on a lot of levels. And I also connected with a real detective, like an actual missing persons detective who was retired, but who gave me first of all, she was such a gift to me, and she read the book multiple times. And so the alcohol piece was a conversation that I had with her where she was like, a lot of cops have experienced trauma. A lot of cops come through the military and have had PTSD. And because they have had PTSD and because they experience so much and they see so much and encounter a traumatic experience every day, both in what they have to endure and what they see. And this is not even missing persons detective who have to see sort of kids who are
Right.
unspeakable things happen to them, that there's a lot of numbing and repressing and shoving it down. Cops have broken marriages, cops abuse alcohol and drugs, opioids, and all of this stuff. And so I started to think about the ways that Anna would be engaging in some of this numbing, right? Because it's too much. It's all too much. Her past is too much. Her present is too much. And then her future gets stolen from her. And all of this sort of sends her spiraling back on herself. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I thought that might be the case, something like that, but I didn't know, it's something that I know intimately. And so of course I notice it. And
Yeah.
it's a typical, it's not just a myth, that in that line of work, there's a lot of numbing, and it felt real in Anna, it felt real. And even though she didn't, go all the way down the line, it wasn't a main part of the story, but you could feel that constant sort of, I need to push this down and push this down. And
Yeah. It was also really important to me, Laura, that she be a flawed character who wrestles with the things that we wrestle with, including not wanting to feel what she feels. I mean, that's just, right? It's just so prevalent in all of our strategies for not feeling what we feel and not dealing with what's right in front of us, and shoving things away and being too tough and getting in our own way and all of that. I mean, again, like those are the characters I want to read about. And also Anna has a really deep shadow self that she has to confront in certain moments. And she has a lot of work to do in terms of being able to forgive herself. So
yes,
it's just the stuff, like this is the stuff, right? This is what
well,
I'm interested in.
yeah, it comes across. So you started, I mean, because I didn't like her at the beginning because she, she left her child
Right.
and her husband, and kind of, there's a coldness that you don't quite understand until later on when you start to learn all about her. And so that was a really, it's interesting to hate the character for a while, or to not have compassion.
It is. And yet characters need to have arcs. And if they don't start at the bottom, how can they ever ascend? And so
those are always my favorite, right? That you end up appreciating them a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it is a dance, right? You're always doing a dance with, how dark can it be at the beginning to earn the light.
Yes.
At the end.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I'm sure there's all kinds of things I don't know about, because I've never, like I said, written fiction. So there's when you experience a really good book that you love, but you don't exactly know why. You don't know, well, they did.
Yeah, you don't know how the writer built it, right? How they pulled that off, or you don't deconstruct it the way, exactly the way. Although if you start writing novels, trust me, you'll start deconstructing novels. How do they do that?
Yeah.
Like how?
I have a lot to do.
Yeah.
So then Hap, okay. Hap's this, I loved him.
Thank
you could like feel him, like his body. He was, it was so, yeah, he was a beautiful presence in that book. So did you have a Hap? Who was he?
Yeah, who is he? My therapist is very interested in this. She asks, who's Hap? So in the book, Hap is Anna's foster father. She comes, as I said a moment ago, when she was 10 years old, and she had had a lot of damage by that point. And Hap is a forest ranger who knows a lot about how to live in the woods. And also how to do all kinds of things, physical things, how to read a trail, how to catch a fish, how to move through the woods with grace as well. And he also accepts Anna for who she is the moment she arrives, and doesn't feed her a line that she should trust them, because of course she doesn't know them. And this was my experience arriving in new foster homes. I mean, just the most bizarre experience about being handed over to strangers who are supposed to be your family. And of course there's this guardedness on both sides. Who are you, and will you hurt me, right? And Hap just arrived like the book itself arrived, like Anna arrived in my consciousness. He just sort of came like full blown, speaking his wisdom. And there's a moment where he says to Anna, or Anna says about him right after she arrives, he already understood how to talk to me, survivor to survivor. Like what he teaches her is competence, and to start to be able to listen to her own voice and to trust herself and to trust her experience. It's only when you trust yourself that you can trust others. I mean, that's really
Yeah.
the trick, right?
That's a big
And that
good.
sometimes takes a lifetime, right?
Yeah.
And so to answer your question, who is Hap? Like, did I have that figure in my own experience? No, I didn't. I never did. I barely had, I mean, my biological father was in and out of prison and a drug addict and a violent, really wounded, damaged person who did a lot of damage to others. And then every single one of my foster fathers was deeply, deeply damaged, complex person. And so I don't really have this father. And so I gave Anna the father that I wished that I had had, and just what the father that everyone deserves, essentially, right? The parent that everyone deserves. But to me, like, the father has this particular, again, my therapist would have a lot to say about that, right?
Yeah, I get it though. I get it. There is a particular place for, you didn't write a mother into that role.
Right.
It could have been a mother who.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. And the Eden character is also very, very important. They sort of have these two poles, Eden is this modern mystic. I'm also very interested in mysticism and in nature, and my dog's about to bark, and hopefully my son, who I've paid off, he's 14 and he's sort of making his own dinner tonight. And
I know that.
oh my goodness, right? I mean, as I'm a single
Mm-hmm.
parent, and so events, particularly by now, my kids are so sick of me doing these things and disappearing into my office in the evenings. But how old is your daughter, Laura?
12.
Okay. So my son's 14 now, and I have a 16-year-old who's at work right now. Yeah.
Oh my God, at work.
I know. She works at Panera. I mean, I know, it's so adorable. She wears a hat, a little apron.
That is adorable. Yeah, they're different creatures I don't have 14 and 16. I know that's different than 12, but they're in the same. It's fascinating. So I bet your therapist has a good time with it, or at least the time. We have. I wanted a Hap. I want a Hap. Who doesn't want a Hap? And he was very important.
Thank you. Nature is very important in the book, and the setting, so it's set in Mendocino, which is a village in Northern California that, if you aren't familiar with the area, it's this Victorian village perched on a bluff above the Pacific, and it's surrounded by redwood forests. And so Hap knows that world, and he gives it essentially to Anna, the love of that world, and just the sort of the deep knowledge of how we can reset our nervous systems, essentially. By being inside nature. I mean, it's just, that's something I know, and I wanted Hap to be able to give that to Anna. And then, of course, it gets knitted into the plot of the book as well, like how this place that she knows better than any place in the world, sort of that knowledge.
It is. So I love place as a character, and you did it extraordinarily in this book.
Thank you.
And California seems to be just like all the books that I love where place is a character are based in California. But there's this element of how she, she's almost animalistic in a way, because that's what happens when you're surviving all the time, right?
Raised by wolves, as I say about my own growing up, raised by wolves. Right?
And so it's beautiful that is also where she feels most at home, and that's her baseline. I appreciated that, because I experience nature that way as well.
Yeah.
I want to be how are we doing on time? I have a lot more questions, but I want to make sure we're okay.
Yeah. So my time says it's 7:12, and we got on at 6:30. That's about 45 minutes. Maybe one more question, and then if Mitz wants to jump back on, if you have one more question.
I do. I have many.
Yeah, okay.
Let me pick
Yeah, maybe what we haven't talked about.
the one I really want to ask you. I mean, this is a boring question, but not really. It's a sort of, you probably get asked by every single person, but I also really want to know, and I bet other people do. It's two questions. Who are you reading right now? And what's happening next?
Yeah, who are you reading right now and what's happening next? So I am reading Animal by Lisa Taddeo. Do you know that book?
Yeah, I do. I got a copy of that one. That's a ride.
Ooh, that is a fierce, fierce book. Yeah. So if you're not familiar, Lisa Taddeo wrote a book called Three Women. I don't know, a couple of years ago, and it was a bestseller about, a nonfiction book, sort of following three women's lives, and so this too is like super. It's about trauma. It's about the way trauma, if we're not aware of it, drives our story. There's a line in my book that says something like, sometimes our stories find a way to tell us instead of the other way around, right? If we're not super conscious of what's driving our behavior. And so in this book, it's really about inherited trauma, what happens before we're born, what happens to us in our childhood, and how we act those things out in our adult lives. And there's a lot of violence in the book, and just ferocity, right? Just ferocity.
Yeah, just the language. I mean, she's an extraordinary writer. I loved Three Women, loved it. I inhaled that book, and the animal is completely different. It's fiction for one, but it's still, she's obviously interested in exploring women, and I love that.
Yeah, and I love that she's sort of fearless about coming forward with a character who is very complicated and difficult, and living out an experience that's it's extreme. It's really extreme and almost kind of volcanic. And I was listening to a podcast interview that you did with I'm gonna space
Young Pueblo.
No. The life coach.
One of that she interviewed me.
No, that you just on your podcast.
Oh, Africa Brooke.
Thank you. About being liked, about how difficult it is for us, particularly as women, to do anything or say anything that might lead to our being unliked, and just how that drives so much of our behavior. But this is something I feel like Lisa today, and I would love to talk to her about it, is like turning over and upside down and backwards and then spinning it like a top, right? So and sexuality and lots of things. But what I love about her as a writer is just at the sentence level, there's such pleasure, like sentence to sentence. And I read, I read to feed myself, and on lots of different levels. And I love a beautiful sentence. I like
love the word.
Pleasure at that level as well. Yeah.
She is an extraordinary writer in that, and just the art of it. I agree.
Yeah. Are you reading anything right now that?
I just finished, and I'm looking for my next. I just finished Before the Fall.
Oh,
hold on.
Is that Noah Hawley book?
Yes, thank you. I was like, Noah, and
you helped me with Africa Brooke. I mean, it's like I'm at that. We're all losing our minds.
It's that hour. I'm basically useless after 3 p.m. So it's amazing. we have formed this many sentences.
I think you're killing it. Thanks. So, yeah, the Noah Hawley book it's a suspense novel about a plane crash.
It is. And it's really good. I just said, I don't read a lot of suspense, but I've been because I'm writing right now, I find that I really like reading that type of book when I'm writing. It has nothing to do with what I'm writing.
Yeah.
I can't read memoir. I can't read nonfiction. I can't read personal development. It's like, I just can't, because that's what
That's
I'm writing.
probably really, really smart. I have a tendency to go overboard. So I don't know exactly what I'm writing next, but I am writing, and I'm, 30,000 words into writing something that I don't know what it is
Gosh.
exactly. But I've been toying with a suspense novel set in the 1970s. And so I've been reading a lot of Joan Didion and kind of really steeping myself. I love Joan Didion. She's
Well,
so,
and what a good reason to read more of her.
oh my God. I mean, the problem, of course, is now I don't want to write ever again because she does.
Yeah, that's a side effect of reading.
Does it so perfectly. I really want to quit. I'm like, I'm just going to go sell shoes in the mall. Like, I'm done. I'm out.
I know. There's a few writers that do that, and she's one of them. Yeah, she did this book Before the Fall was excellent. I finished it in 2 days. It's good. It's great. I'd never read him before. So
yeah, I've not read it. I actually think our mutual friend Patty Callahan Henry is the one who told me to read that book. Maybe she told you to read that book.
She didn't. I got that from someone else. But Samantha Irby told me to read it. But it was well worth it. And then another one I just finished, I haven't read Jennifer Weiner in forever. Oh. And her latest one that summer was spectacular. Wow. Yeah, I haven't, and it was set in Cape Cod, which I love because it's local to me in Massachusetts. And so it was
smart. She really gets so much right. Yeah.
Well, I haven't read her since like In Her Shoes days, which I loved, but that was forever. I mean, that was probably 15. She went to high school, ironically, with my husband. And so I think, that was like her first big book, In Her Shoes. That was probably 20 years ago, maybe a little bit less. So I haven't read her since then, and not for any reason, but this was like, wow, she's grown as a writer a lot. Like this is good.
I don't think very often about when books are published because they come to us when they come to us. You know what I mean? And they're ageless because we take them with us. If they're the kind of book that we're meant to keep with us, then we're going to take them with us wherever.
I agree. I think about when I read them or when they came out, because it's like when you discovered an artist's like music, it's like it's part of my life. That's why I think of it. Like I remember the apartment I lived in when I read The Paris Wife. I was living in South Boston it was one of our book club books, and just being like, for a writer or an aspiring writer, that's like gold, because you're talking about all these amazing writers at this super magical time. So
my favorite quote before we go off and Mitz comes back on, my favorite quote about the book was that it's pornography for English majors.
Oh my God, yes, and I was not an English major, but it's so true. Like, God, if I could be there for a day, I know. And of course the women, she was incredible. Yeah, that I got to reread that again, because I'm a different woman now, and I just wonder how it would feel.
Well,
it is.
Thank you. So Mitz, do you have other questions? Or you or Travis is writing us? Oh, hi.
Hello. Looks like
people are just taking it in tonight.
Just breathe in the rarefied air.
Although I did want to ask if you could go a little bit more into the metaphysical aspects of it.
Yeah. So as Laura mentioned, there's a character, her name's Tally Hollander, who is a medium, a psychic medium. And so she appears in the novel because she's had a vision of where Cameron, the victim, not where she might be, but just that she's in trouble. And so how she appeared in the book was really, again, just kind of kind of out of nowhere, I decided that, it does happen in missing persons investigations that psychics appear. And in fact, I'm just going to say quickly, because we didn't talk about this, but it's super relevant. So the book is set in 1993, and I didn't always know that it would contain factual elements. And the Polycloss abduction and murder is embedded into my narrative, and it sort of grew out of my research. And so in that investigation, a psychic came forward. In fact, multiple psychics came forward. So I started thinking about how that might be something that bounces between the two stories, the real girl who goes missing and then my fictional character. And also because I'm just really interested. But I'm not interested in a psychic that kind of gives us all the stuff. And it's actually why I'm not interested in these CSI shows where someone opens a laptop and like immediately knows everything. And those characters, those detectives who are never wrong, right? And it's why I wanted to set the book before DNA, before, before the internet, before cell phones, sort of tech free, so that people actually had to talk to each other. So the Tally character doesn't resolve anything for us. If anything, she's the kind of character who basically points Anna back at herself and just lets us know that there's something out there that's bigger than we are. And that maybe that bigger something is connecting us, not just to each other, but to our life's purpose. And so that was just a really important message for me to have sort of in the fabric of the book. And so I needed to put it in somebody's mouth, right? And that's something that we do in novels, right? There needs to be a way for this to be embedded in the story. And I love their relationship. She's really just kind of a therapist. If anything, that is a chance for Anna, again, to learn to trust herself and to learn that she's here for a reason. And I mean, what better, that's really the hopeful message of the entire book, even though it goes to some dark places, is that we're here for a reason, and the things that we've endured have happened for a reason, and they shape us in profound ways, and sometimes they lead us to each other. Mm-hmm. And leading us to each other, us finding each other, is how we save ourselves,
It looks like there is a question in the Facebook. It is for Laura, and it's any thoughts about what your novel would be about?
Ooh, see, see,
the broad question.
I said that. No. I know that's a disappointing answer, but I really don't know. I know that I know that it would be very character driven. That's what I like and what I care about. As we've talked about, Paul, I want to could I just write Normal People by Sally Rooney? How about that? If I could write my equivalent of that book, that's what I would want to write.
Well, wouldn't that be amazing? Do you want to tell us what you're working on now?
Sure. The book that I'm working on now is called Push Off From Here, and it's a in the epigraph to We Are the Luckiest, there's a list of 9 things, and it's not your fault. It is your responsibility. It is unfair that this is your thing. This is your thing. This will never stop being your thing until you face it. You can't do it alone. Only you can do it. You are loved, and I will never stop reminding you of these things. And those 9 things came from a letter that I wrote to somebody who didn't know how to talk to her sister about her sister's drinking. And she was scared and upset. And so it was really someone not who was struggling with alcohol, but someone who was worried about someone struggling with alcohol. And I wrote her this long letter. And then I said, but if that's too much, just give her this list. And it is the epigraph to that book, to my book, but it became something. It's now a big part of the community that I run. And we say those 9 things at the end of every meeting. And so it's a dive into those 9 things. So sort of a program for people who want to overcome their thing, whatever their thing
Whatever
is.
that is, the obstacle, the thing, right? The thing,
Mm.
right? Whether or not that's alcohol or any other kind of addiction. But
Yeah,
that,
I mean, it is, my book is focused on alcohol, but it really is, it's really about anything. So
Yeah.
the 9 books are about anything. So that's my next book.
Yeah.
All right. We also have a question on Zoom, and I guess going the other way, this question's for Paula. What is the agenda for your next book?
Aha. What is the agenda? What am I writing next? Well, as I just said, I'm not exactly sure, but I'll tell you this, like that thing that happened when I had the idea for When the Stars Go Dark, and the way that it kind of levered me kind of out of the place that I had gotten really comfortable. Like I said, there, like I just sort of felt like I knew that language, that I had a facility with how to write that kind of book. It was the absolute scariest time then for me to do something else. And then what happened was it blew off the ceiling, you know? And so when I used to finish a book like Circling the Sun, my question was, okay, who do I want to write about next in this particular genre? And now it just feels like I could write anything next. And the freedom that comes with just that idea, and that I have a support team, like I have a publisher who literally wants for me what I want for myself. And I just can't even tell you the power of that, right?
That's a writer's dream, I
That's a
think.
writer's dream. So whatever it is that makes me feel like there's no ceiling and I can write anything next, and that I can follow these deep-seated obsessions that lead me to, I don't know, it's my job, but it's also my vocation. It's my religion, right? And it's my work is really precious to me. And so I don't tackle small questions. I don't feel, and I'm not interested in that, or trying to sell books or whatever. I'm trying to, I'm looking always for what's calling me. So whatever that is,
We'll see.
I'm on my way. I'm pushing off from here. So
Nice. Well, I can't wait, whatever it is.
thank you. And same.
Somehow we landed at the same publisher too.
I know. I know. Yes, Laura just
That was a
signed
good day.
publisher. So yeah, we have the same, right? Family.
Same family.
I like it.
Me too. Got any others?
All right, I think that's it for the questions, unless anyone wants to add anything now. But I guess just one more time, and I do want to just make a quick correction from earlier. For some reason, I said that the Cold Millions talk will be on October 29th. I meant July, or not the Cold Millions, the Black in the Middle talk. I said October 29th, it's July 29th. So
A little sooner.
yeah, quick correction
A
there.
little sooner. Just, you know. The Jess Walter sounds amazing. Do you read him, Laura? I think he's absolutely fantastic.
I don't. So I need to know, where do I start?
Beautiful Ruins, I would say. I love that book so much. Yeah. He's brilliant.
On it.
Yeah. And writes beautiful sentences as well. I don't think you'll be disappointed.
Great.
Money back guarantee.
Money back guarantee.
Money back guarantee. Well, I have had just the most lovely time talking to you, and I knew that you were going to be fun to talk to, because just who you are already in the world. So thank you for your time and attention. Thanks for reading with such care. And thanks to the library for hosting us, and also just supporting my work over the years. You know, I think this is the third time I've done an event with you, and that just feels really good as a writer to know that I have this extended family, that we're all in it together, right? So thank you.
Thank you. This is great.